Shalom and welcome to Life Lessons, segment 11. We are in Parshat Vayigash. This is the 11th section in the book of Genesis, known in Hebrew as Parshat, as Chumash Bereshit. First, let me start with a story. This is going back in the 60s when still it was the Soviet Union, for those that remember. And during the communist time, especially those that had a hard times, was to the Jewish people to keep their observancy and to keep their religion. This was very, very hard because communism, as much they believed in brotherhood and friendship and all kinds of wonderful words, but when it came to practice, they did not like people that kept their religion, especially the Jewish people, when they were observant. So it was very, very hard and very difficult. One of the difficulties was when it came to keep the Sabbath. And it was very hard to keep a job, and they would force the kids to go to school, where they make them write and do things that is forbidden to do on the Sabbath. So this goes back with a family, and they had an older boy that wasn't yet married. He was in his late teens, early 20s. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, and this is we're talking about in the year of 5728, this is 1968, the end of 1968, during a Hasidic gathering on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is when we dance with the Torah. And here the Rebbe, this is a very joyous occasion, and here the Rebbe was addressing all his followers, and he said he received a letter from this student from Russia, from the Soviet Union. And he writes to him about a problem. And the problem that he writes to him is that when he prays to the Almighty, he finds himself sometimes very hard to concentrate. So he's asking the Lubavitcher Rebbe advice, what should he do that he should be able to concentrate a little bit better when he prays. So the Rebbe paused and looked on all his Hasidim. He says, imagine what's going on now in Soviet Union. How difficult it is to be Jewish, to keep your religion. You would think that what he would be writing is asking for advice how to leave the country, how to get out, or how to survive the persecutions. And what does he write? He writes, I need advice how to be able to concentrate on my prayers. And as the story goes, for those that were there, the Rebbe cried. He cried because describing the situation, look on this student, this is what's bothering him. And the fact itself that he's sending a letter, he's putting himself in danger to send a letter outside of the Soviet Union, knowing for sure that somebody is reading those letters and knowing where is this going? This is going to the religious leader, the Jewish leader at that time of world Jewry, and what kind of suspicion this is bringing into and danger to this bacher, to this Jewish student. But look at that. That doesn't bother him. What bothers him, he has a problem about concentration. What that means, in short, the Rebbe says, is we have an individual that took hold of his problems, did not let himself to become victim to his problems. He owns his problems and he rises above his problems. And this is an amazing thing that sometimes it's very hard for us to understand. And when we find ourselves in a free country that we live day after day, sometimes we become slaves to our challenges and we allow our problems to dictate us. Instead of owning our problems and being in charge of our problems, and then our lives could be much better and much more successful. Same story at that year. since we're speaking about 1968 and a story about the Rebbe. So at that year, there was another great student that later on became very famous, was visiting the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was then a student in Oxford. And he came to the Rebbe because he had some questions. Questions in faith, questions in theology, and he was asking all his questions. When he finished asking all his questions, and the Rebbe answered him, so the Rebbe says to him, and obviously with a smile, young fellow, now it's my turn to ask questions. Now this young student wasn't expecting this. He thought he's there to ask questions. He didn't expect that now he's going to have to give answers. But out of respect, he says, of course, Rabbi. So the Rabbi says, you are a Jewish student in Oxford. Could you tell me, do you know how many Jewish students are there in Oxford? What's their status of observancy? What's happening with their Judaism? Well, the students start to say, well, in this situation that I find myself, and he wanted to continue saying, well, I'm busy with my studies and this course and that course. I really don't have time to look around about what's going on. But the Rebbe stopped him as he was talking, and he says, there's no such a thing in the situation you find yourself. You put yourself in a situation. If you put yourself in a situation, you could take yourself out of that situation and put yourself in another situation. That student got the message, walked out of there, and later on became the famous Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi of Britain, just retired not long ago. Where the Rebbe basically was advising, you are in charge of your situation. Take hold of your situation. So here we have two stories in the same year, one from the Soviet Union, where we see this young student takes care of all his challenges and is trying to figure out how to concentrate in his prayers, and what the Rebbe said to Rabbi Sacks. What's important about this is with our lesson today in this parasha, in this segment of Vayigash. What do we see? We see about Joseph. Now, first thing is, this is the section where we finally see everyone coming together. The lost brother that nobody knew what happened to him, and they have sold him, and now they've regretted what they have done, and for a while not knowing what had happened to him, and here they're all back together, reunited with Jacob, their father, and it's all excitement as we come towards the end of this segment. But till we come to that point, quite a few challenges, and we see how Joseph takes care of his challenges. And when he meets his brothers, and when he finds out and he sees this is his brothers, he doesn't complain to them. He doesn't turn to them, and it was very easy to really give it to them. And says, shame on you what you have done to me. And I need to quote to you what's going on here and what he said, and there's two parts to his statement. So the verse says as follows. This is when Joseph turns to his brother and he says to them, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? And the verse says his brother stepped back, shocked. This comes after Joseph took away Benjamin, and the brother Judah was arguing for him, says, I'm responsible to bring him back. And then finally, Joseph sees how finally the brothers do care for each other, and he sees a change of attitude, so he reveals himself. He says to them, I am Joseph. And as the verse says, they couldn't speak. And then Joseph says, come closer, approach me, come closer to me. And he says to them, I am Joseph that you sold me here to Egypt. Now, expecting now that he's really going to give it to them, comes the following verse and says, this is verse 5 in chapter 45, And he says, now don't be sad and don't be upset that you had sold me, because God had sent me here to provide food. It's been already 2 years of hunger and another 5 years. And God had sent me ahead of you that I should be able to give sustenance to everyone. This is great faith. So he's viewing the whole incident, how terrible as it is. This is the worst that could be, where the brothers sold their own brother. But he views that as, this is what somehow, maybe we don't understand exactly how God runs his world, but this is the outcome. This is what he wanted. Joseph needed to be in Egypt. And he's the one that's going to come up with a solution to solve the hunger of Egypt and of the entire world in that time. And the only way that Joseph is going to get there is by some crazy story. And that crazy story has happened. And Joseph realizes, when he realizes what's happening is, so he looks at them and says, don't be upset. And then he continues by saying, you, all of you, it's not you that sent me here. It's God. And so successful I have become that I am in charge in Pharaoh's house. Go up, tell Father all this, and tell him about this and bring him back here. Now there's something very important here that we need to understand. And this is going back to the dream of Joseph. Everything has a deeper meaning and about what's going on. Earlier on, what made the brothers upset is Joseph's 2 dreams. He has a dream of everyone bowing down to him. How does that come out? So the first dream he has about the stalks of wheat, 11 of them, and they all bow down to one. So this is a sign of the 11 brothers bowing down to Joseph. And then he has the 11 stars and the sun and the moon bowing down. So they viewed that he's trying to tell them that he's going to be in charge. And obviously they didn't want to hear that. They thought they're going to get rid of him and that the problem will go away. Now, they realize how mistaken they was. And not only that, the dream is true, because they all had bowed down to the viceroy of Egypt, not knowing that this was Joseph. But as everything in the Torah has a very deeper message in what's going on here. So we are told amongst the brothers, there were 2 directions, 2 paths of leadership. One is, and that later on this is how it became, this is the leadership of Judah. Judah later from him became the kings. The king of Israel, King David, is a descendant of Judah, and we are told that the Messiah king is also a descendant of Judah. But anyways, so this is Judah. In Egypt, we see that Joseph was the viceroy, so that represents to us one kind of a leadership, the leadership of Joseph. Kabbalistically speaking, or mystically speaking, what is the difference between the leadership of Judah and the leadership of Joseph? So we're told as follows. Joseph represents survival during hardship. When times are hard, and we need to be strong in our faith, and things don't go good the way they're supposed to, so then you need to be strong. That's what Joseph represents. Joseph was sold as a slave to Egypt, didn't lose his faith even for 1 second, even for 1 moment. He took ownership of his situation, and that's the point that we're bringing out from the story of the Rebbe. Did not let those challenges to overcome him. He finally made it in the house of Potiphar. He hired him to be a servant, and then he saw he was successful, made him in charge. And we saw in the previous section, where the wife of his master starts up with him and accuses him with all kinds of accusation. And then he's put in jail. Enough for Joseph to get depressed 100 times. I've been sold. I finally made it here, and now I'm accused. I'm back in jail. He's in jail for 12 years. And during those years, we have the story with the butler, where he gives the interpretation to the butler. And he tells the butler, do me just one favor. When you come out of here, tell Pharaoh there's an innocent person sitting in jail. And the verse tells us the butler had forgotten. He came out and had forgotten. So it was only till Pharaoh has his dream about the cows, the weak cows eating up the fat cows, and they no interpretation. They found out that there's somebody in jail that knows how to give interpretation, that this is Joseph. And finally comes out, gives the right interpretation and the solutions, and he made it. But till that point, so many challenges. So that's one thing. This is one thing just on the personal level, on the psychological level, to be strong and not to give in to the situation. But then comes even stronger than that, the education and what you were brought up with. In other words, everything that he was brought up by his father in his father's home, he did not forget. As we saw earlier on, every step of the way, he says the name of God. And God was with him. What does it mean, God with him? We're told he always mentions God's name. Joseph, how you doing? Thank God. Everything is mentioning God's name, that everyone listening to him say, well, this kid is crazy about God. He's obsessed with the name God. Nobody talks that way, especially in the pagan Egypt of those days. Nobody's going to mention every other word in the name of God. God said so, with the help of God. What's the matter with this guy? But this Joseph was who Joseph was. So in other words, Joseph, not only that Joseph is strong, physically strong, emotionally strong, didn't let the situation to take hold of him, but he's strong in the religion that he was brought up. He's strong in the education that his parents had given him, and he doesn't let go. It's easy to say, while he's in Egypt and things are not going the way it's supposed to say, where is God? What's going on over here? Maybe I should change course. Maybe I should start looking for a new religion. Maybe I should leave everything. No. Joseph realizes that behind the scene, there must be a plan. There must be a reason why all this is happening. And later on, it becomes very clear why all this is happening and why he's there. But what's important to us is not that the story turned out good. A lot of stories, by the end, it turns out to be very good. What's important to us is about Joseph, that he was able to stand strong even when the situation demanded from him to be down. So this is the kind of leadership that Joseph stands for. So Joseph stands for a leadership that when things are hard. Judah, on the other point, represents a leadership when everything is fine, when everything is glorious. You need that too. You need that because at the same time they tell us that when we are successful, also there's, God forbid, that situation where we may forget about the Creator. In other words, you have both extremes. You have a situation when things are no good and you're very upset and you say, where is God? And you get upset. And then there is when things are wonderful, and then because things are so wonderful that you forget that who made everything wonderful. It is God that made everything wonderful, and then you forget to praise God for all the good things. So in other words, the danger of forgetting about our Creator is both ways, in down times or in high times. These two gentlemen, Joseph and Judah, represents those two ideas. Joseph represents to praise God when things are not going the way they're supposed to. And Judah represents when things are fine. So here the brothers, in a deeper sense, when they hear a dream that everyone is bowing down to Joseph, things became bleak. They were not so happy to hear that. They said, wow, that means it's going to be a time of no good times. It's going to be some hard times. We don't want that. We only want to have good times. You know what? Let's get rid of the symbol of bad times. Let's get rid of Joseph. And that way we will right away go into the good times. Well, you don't mess around with God's plans. However, this is what Joseph represented. So you could only imagine. So here they are in Egypt. And Egypt represents the opposite of Israel. Israel is considered the Holy Land. Egypt was known as the opposite of the Holy Land. And here they are in Egypt. And they are dealing with the viceroy that represents Pharaoh. And in their mind this is all no good. He had kidnapped Benjamin, and he's talking them these kinds of things. Where's your father? What happened to you? And they're all very suspicious about what's going on. In their mind, this represents one step after the other step that where things are not going good. And all of a sudden, Joseph turns to them and says, I am Joseph. And the verse says they were shocked. And according to this, they're even more shocked. They couldn't open their mouth because it hit them. It's reality. Joseph is the leader. And Joseph right away continues to tell them, it's God that sent me here to provide sustenance. Even when you find yourself in Egypt, you need to praise God for everything that He's doing, especially in a time of hunger. He is giving. And I'm only the messenger to show to everyone how to do it. So that's a very important point. And now he says, go and tell Father about this. So that is a very important lesson. With that together, we see something very interesting also. Because this is one level. When we talk about Joseph, there's two things. There's one, high, you stand strong. So when, and this is a very important point, when we talk about being strong, so the question becomes, who is being strong? Am I for myself being strong? But the question is, what's with the rest? Am I strong enough to carry a message to influence others? In other words, sometimes it could be, I got the message. I understand. I understand that things are a little bit harder. I own my challenges and I am in charge, but fine. But I'm an individual. And basically, I'm very happy with my four walls, and I'll try to work on my challenges, but don't bother me, I'm fine. This person is not interested so much in carrying the message to others. Because what happens is a lot of times is, step number one is that the person needs to be sure themselves in what they believe, in what they are. So let's say we've been successful and we finally got the message. Comes Torah and teaches us, don't stop there. You need to carry that message that others should understand. We all need to be role models and show others. So what do we see here in these verses? And this becomes very important here. Step number one, Joseph tells them, because if you'll see all these verses, there's a lot of repetition here. But if we think about it, it's not just simple repetition. Because first he says to them, God had sent me here to give you sustenance. And then he repeats again, it's not only you have sent me here, it's God that sent me. But then he adds on a very important word. And he made me as a father to Pharaoh, as a ruler in Egypt. This is not only that Joseph was successful in being strong, but now he's carrying the message. He has become the ruler of Egypt, that he could teach that now to the rest of Egypt. And this is a very important point. And then he comes and says, you must go to Father and tell him that. And we see something very interesting, when they arrive in Israel to tell Jacob about what's going on, because till that point he does not know what's happening with Joseph. The verses here also become very important. The verses says as follows, and this is in verses 27, 28. Really, to go back a little bit, is in 25. So the verse says like this: they went up from Egypt, and they came to the land of Canaan, and they said to the father, Joseph is still alive. And he was very excited. The spirit of Jacob was revived. Then the verse says again, Israel said, because Jacob had two names, Israel said, I have a lot to look forward now because my Joseph is alive. Let me go and see him. What is the double excitement here? And based on what we just said till now, there's two excitements here by Jacob. Number one, my son is alive. That's a given. He's so happy he's alive. Like any father, you come and tell him the son is alive. But now there's another thing that Jacob is wondering. Okay, my son is alive. But is he really alive? What kind of a person is he? He's been for 22 years in Egypt now, in a culture that is so bad, with no education around him, with nothing there. Is he strong? What's with him? He's kind of wondering. Tell me more about him. So they say, well, Joseph is very strong. He's really alive. Wow, says Jacob. That's great. And then they continue and they tell him, not only this, he's the ruler. He had succeeded to become now the role model of Egypt. Wow, says Jacob. This is unbelievable. So not only is he alive, but he is strong in his beliefs and his faith. And not only this, he has become a role model. That is the lesson for all of us. Number one, we need to be alive. Number two, we should be very strong in our faith. And number two, let's not keep it to ourselves. Let's give this message to everyone about the beauty of our religion to everyone else. Thank you very much.